crochet fans, welcome back to the Naughty Habit Crochet channel. If this is your first time joining us, welcome, welcome. Glad you're with me. And if this is your second visit, or maybe your third, I don't know, I'm so glad you're here, and I hope that you find whatever we talk about today super helpful. Speaking of which, what we're going to talk about today is something that a lot of us veteran crochet lovers take for granted. When I think back to the very beginning of my crochet journey, when I was first starting out, one of the things that I found most frustrating is that I would begin a piece with something in mind. I wanted to make a blanket or a scarf, something rectangular, because that's oftentimes what crocheters begin with, because they're the easiest projects to do, something that's nice, a regular rectangle or a regular square. And so we begin the project with high hopes, and then inevitably, after a few rows, or maybe even 10 or 15 rows, we find that something that should be a nice regular rectangle is becoming more like a trapezoid. And then we end up having to do what is extraordinarily frustrating to newcomers. We have to frog our work. And if you don't know what it means to frog your work, it means you rip it out. Rip it, ribbit, frog. Anyways, what I'm here to do today is help you not have to frog your work by helping you see where those final stitches in a row are, and also where the beginning stitches are, so that when you start a project, you know exactly where to turn, and you don't end up with something that's all wonky and out of shape. We'll look at the stitches. I'll help you try to identify them without the use of any standard stitch marker. You can pick them up at a craft store. I have a bunch. Let me see, I might have one in my pocket actually. What do you know? I always have these things hanging around. If you haven't seen them before, this is what a stitch marker looks like. It even matches my nail polish. It's kind of like a little padlock with a little clippy thing that it just kind of locks in place. You can find them that are just little rings that you kind of flip through the stitch. Very, very helpful, but also they can be kind of a pain if you can't, like, they're really small. If you forget to move them up the next row, that can be a problem. And if you're anything like me, when you're working on something that's only like 10 or 15 stitches across, no big deal to count. But if you're working on something really big, like right now I'm working on a temperature gauge afghan, and I'm making it to be basically a queen size with a drape. So my rows are 315 stitches. I do not want to count 315 stitches. And sometimes I don't have these guys. So if I can't find my last stitch and I really want to be able to keep working, I'll show you also how to make a stitch marker out of nothing more than a scrap piece of yarn. So if this sounds like something you're interested in learning, then follow me and we will check it out.
Okay, so to help us out, I've enlisted the help of my mini-me, Bridget. She's my daughter. She just turned 10 in January, and she's pretty new to crochet. So I thought it would be helpful if she would explain how she finds the last stitch and how she knows where to stop. So yeah, let's see what Bridget has to say.
Hey, Bee.
Hi. Okay.
Ready to help us out?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So what are you going to show us?
So, this is just a piece of yarn my mom worked up really quick. So you would start working, and when you get to the end, you should see this little loop.
Yeah, show us the loop.
That's just sticking up out of nowhere. And when you get to that point, then you should stop your work, turn it around, and then keep going. And as you're doing that, you should probably count, so then you know when to stop, so it's all equal.
Okay, so one of the things that, all right, so you brought up a really good point that's good for newcomers, and that is to count your stitches to make sure you're not adding or losing any stitches, right? Okay, so what if somebody's working on something that's like my afghan that I'm making right now that's 300 stitches? Should they count 300 stitches every single row?
No. My mom has a stitch counter, You would put it around your finger, and every time you'd finish a stitch, you'd
Oh, you're talking about that my
the
little
little
clicky
click
thing. That's actually better for working in rows because to click every time I do a stitch, I would definitely forget to do that. So, all right, so would you want to physically actually count 300 stitches?
Definitely not.
No. So it's pretty important to know how to find that stitch.
Okay, so here I am. I have my foundation chain done. I'm going to get ready to start my single crochet row. I add one chain so that I can make the turn, and now I start my single crochet. As I'm moving across the row, you'll notice that I'm very careful to get my hook into the stitch so that it's not only under that kind of top loop of the stitch but also under that back hump, because that's going to give me some more stability in my row. It's going to make that kind of bottom edge a lot more stable. It's because I'm a beginner. I'm taking my time. I'm making sure that I'm going into each stitch exactly where I should, making sure that I'm not skipping any of my stitches, because on the foundation row it can be really, really easy to miss one of those stitches. So always take your time. In a short row like this, it's very easy to count. However, if this were a 100 stitch row or a 300 stitch row, you're gonna not want to have to count each individual stitch. It'll get a little monotonous, and then when you multiply that by however many rows you're working on, oh my goodness, yes. So here I am, almost to the end of my row. So now I'm gonna have to start watching. I'm gonna take a look, stretch it out, see what I'm working with, and yes, I'm super, super close. I have 2 stitches left here. And I can see that because there's the knot right there. That's the knot where I made my slip knot. I can't go past that, obviously. So I'm going to be crocheting right up to that point. And Bridget showed you earlier how to know when you've reached that point. So here I am. I'm going to finish that row. Yep. One more to go. All right, let's stretch it out, take a look. Nice even stitches. They're all consistently the same size. Now we're going to look at it a little more closely. So as you can see, these little arrowheads, they're showing you where the little V's are on each individual stitch. That's what you're looking for. That's what you're crocheting into. When you stop seeing those little arrowhead shapes, you are going to stop crocheting. Okay, so I'm at the end of my row, obviously. Now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to turn my work around, and I'm going to get ready to go back the other way. Now I'm going to have to be watching on the other side to see when I hit the end so that I don't end up crocheting too few or too many. Okay, I've come close to reaching the end of this next row. I want to stretch it out again. I want to see what I'm working with. I have 3 stitches left here, and I can very clearly see those little arrowhead shapes that I'm going to be crocheting into. There's one there to the point. Here's another one. And here's the last one. And right here at the end, you see that little loop that Bridget pointed out earlier. I cannot crochet into that. I'm going to be crocheting right up to the point. And that's when I stop. Here we go. Let's finish these last 3 stitches. There's one, and there's 2, and the third one, sometimes you really have to dig for it. You've got to get both pieces of that stitch. Otherwise, it's going to stretch out and it's going to be all wonky. So let me show you what you're getting at here. You have to get both parts. Here's the front part, which is pretty easy usually to grab. It's that second piece, that back end, that can be just a little bit tricksy. So you're going to want to make sure that you dig that hook in there and get both pieces of the stitch. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a little trick if you don't have any stitch markers and if you're still having trouble keeping an eye on those last stitches. I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit and grab a scrap piece of yarn. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark that last stitch so that I know where it is. I know where I'm going to be crocheting into with my first stitch of the following round. So I grab my little piece of contrasting color yarn, and sometimes I make it a little bit longer. That way I can kind of pull it up as I work my rows, which I'll show you in just a second. But all right, so there it is. It's in the last stitch of the row. Chain 1 because I'm single crocheting, make my turn, and now look, I know exactly where to put my first stitch because I've marked it. And now I'm going to work my way back across the row, single crocheting just like we know how to do, making sure that my stitches are all a consistent shape and size. And one thing I can do to help myself is I can go ahead and start pulling that little stitch marker up. This is way easier than using a standard stitch marker because I don't have to clip it in. I just grab it with my hook and pull it through, and there it is. It's marked the last stitch of the row. So when I turn around, I know where to stop. Alright, here I am back at the end of my row. I'm going to take a look. I'm definitely not done yet because I have a little bit left. And as I look, yep, there's one more of those little kind of arrowhead pointy V shapes, followed by that loop we saw earlier that I cannot go past. So I'm going to go in, finish the stitch. This one was a little bit easier to get into. Take a look. One of the things I'm going to look for is a straight edge. And yep, I have it. It's looking really good, not angling inward or outward. Chain 1 to make my single crochet turn. Skip it, go into the first stitch, and start my way back across. But because I'm just learning, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull a super quick piece of yarn through here as another stitch marker. And once I do that, I will have effectively marked both the beginning and end stitches of that row. So now there is absolutely no question where I'm going to start my row and where I'm going to finish my row. All right, so I'm back at the other end and check it out. I don't even have to question now. I know exactly where I'm going to stop because I put that little scrap of yarn in there. And incidentally, the more you do this, the more you crochet, the less likely it is you're going to need a marker. You're just going to get used to the feel, you're going to get used to the look, and you'll just know when you're supposed to stop. But like anything, it takes muscle memory and it takes practice. So use them for as long as you have to. All right, I'm back. I made my first stitch to help myself out. Now I don't even have to unplug the little stitch marker like the regular plastic ones. I just grab the end of the yarn, pull it through that side. I can have that kind of woven in all the way up, or I can do this and just pull the next end out and keep it moving. A lot simpler than attaching an actual stitch marker. Check it out, looking good. Nice and consistent stitches. Beautiful work.
Okay, so I hope you found that helpful. I hope that after watching that, you either can identify those stitches that you're looking for, or that at the very least you have a new easy way to mark those stitches that doesn't require having a stitch marker laying around. As always, please subscribe so that you get updated the next time I post a video. I think up next I'm going to be working on how to change colors, because that's something that a lot of people seem really interested in learning about. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine that with how to weave in ends so that you have basically invisible sewing, so that nobody knows you've switched colors. Well, obviously they'll know that you switched colors, but so that no one can see where those ends are, and so that they're locked securely in place and nothing can unravel. Yeah, so hit subscribe. Down in the description, you'll also find a link to my Facebook page, Naughty Habit Boutique. Please check me out, and just like with video number 1, I absolutely want to see what you're working on. So if after today you've been able to do something that you were struggling with, shoot me a picture, send me a message, and I will post it on the page, because I'm all about educating and all about giving props to people who are creating and making this world a more beautiful place. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you soon. Bye. Alright guys, so I'm trying something new. I'm taking tips from my daughters who are avid YouTube video watchers, and I'm going to do a giveaway. So I want to get my videos out to the most people possible. So the first 25 subscribers, I already have 9 at this point, so the next 14, or excuse me, the next 16, let's get my math right, anyways, the first 25 subscribers, you guys are going to be entered into a drawing to win this little guy right here. I'm super excited about him. I'm just now getting started on doing amigurumi. I think one person on the Facebook group that I'm involved in said that they wanted to learn how to make stuffed animals, and I've just gotten started on this. This is my cute little elephant. Totally love him. So, first 25, you will be entered into a drawing to win this little guy. And yeah, so hit subscribe, hit like, and share this video with your friends. Anybody you know who's interested in learning how to crochet, spread the word, because my videos are going to focus on the newbies to crochet.